Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to make one of those random meshes baked texture maps again, and we're just going to use the plain and Greeble bake for the baking. So kind of like cream sheets, but there's no sections and it's just a whole texture. So more like Displacement in a sense. And I'm going to add just random topology here because randomization is based on the topology, and going to use random loop extrude loops square 80, and we have to increase the resolution or subdivision to notice the change in the, or actually generate the patterns. Okay, so this is good. So we need the, never set the thickness to 0 because the baking process will not be able to bake the details unless you have these spaces in the uh, between the panel islands. Okay. So global seed, and I'm just going to play around with that. Let's try base. Probably gonna it's probably gonna look weird, but let's just use tree, which is square. The maze is going to be in the upcoming update, and panel size 10. Panel size, the less that you have here, the smaller the panel islands are, so more details, but also increased processing or overhead. Okay, there's too much resolution in this part, so I'm going to remove this edge and probably just add more edge, a single edge here. And just click on this. There you go. We're just going to layer the details. Okay, let's try this one. And this is what it looks like on this side, and pick one of the loop objects and then use pre-select Control Shift F to select the coplanar faces, and then I'm going to add another layer of detail on these top faces here. So if you don't have pre-select, just select a face from the top and use coplanar. You can increase the threshold by showing the redo panel using the F9 hotkey. Okay, let's try random panels and 50% or not. So just let's use square 100% angle. So this twist, this is because the geometry itself is twisted. So let's just try this one instead. Twist the resolution. So basically, again, layering the details. Okay, and selecting another one. And another one. So be careful with the probably it's probably too much. Be careful with the subdivision. Okay, let's go back to the source mesh again, which is the plane or our work mesh. And then I'm going to use random tubes and start off with the points 100 high offset and just increase the resolution, the width or the thickness of the pipe. Let's reduce that. And also, where's the segment? The bevel. So let's use 4 segments and introduce a margin so the tubes actually generate some generate with some margin beyond the boundaries of the plane. And then let's modify the offset and just let it show some areas and hide some others, and the bevel of the corners of the pipes. So let's actually make this make a lot more pipes, increasing the subdivision and then increasing the thickness, decreasing the thickness. There we go. So subdivision cut 10. Then seed value here, you can play around with the positioning of the tubes. Yeah, let's try that and select the tubes and then so I'm trying to save the file right now. Okay, select the tubes, go to extras and flanges couplings. This only works on curve type objects, so if you have turned the cables or tubes into meshes, this operator will no longer work. And custom cable coupling flanges 1. Okay, let's probably just try basic and then just modify the resulting shape. Increase the depth or the thickness and increase the number of these flanges in the pipes. Let's reduce the radius some more. Increase the amount. Okay, and then we're going to select the geometry and then delete the ones that we don't need. So again, using pre-select, Control Shift F, then F9 and delete linked. And then we can just start deleting some of the geometries that doesn't make any sense showing up or being overlapped or clipped. We're going to fix this twisted. Probably not. There's a lot of them. And this one. Okay. Selecting this one. I'm going to use random cells and generate those tiny or small squares. There we go. Just some random detail, and we need to actually introduce thickness to this for the baking to actually see it. If it's just pointing straight up, um, those will not be detected in the normal map. Island size, full size, and pick another set of islands. Generate the same uh, geometry. Okay, I think we're ready to bake and just try it out. But first I'm going to convert the curves into meshes. Wait, let me try the let me try random tubes, or no, random cables, and use curve, and then increase the thickness and wiggle them. So this is too random. Here's the amount. Anyway, another method of random detail. And to increase the frequency of the wiggle, we can reduce the steps. Something like that. Use the thickness. Do we have an offset? We have an offset. We can hide them and just let it show for some areas and mostly hidden for some. There we go. Okay. Origin seed. Wiggle. Let's reduce the wiggle. Set the cable amount to 500. Oh, that's too much. 300. 250. There we go. Okay. And selecting the curve and Shift G. Select all type. That is a curve. Oh my god. Apply mesh. That will make them a uh, mesh type object. Let's go to Greeble bake. So by the way, if the Greeble bake, if the bake is kind of offset, you can just use an external bake to object right here, bake to object. So this will the object will only show up if it's not selected. So right here, but you can just use the eyedropper. Make sure that the bake to object is not selected for it to be selected for this one. So and just manually position it on the center of the geometry. So if the automatic if the bake to object provided by the script, which is activated when there's no object here, doesn't, so it bakes like this with an offset. So it's not really center, because the center is going for is the average location of the vertices in the mesh, and sometimes it fails because of the way the mesh is constructed. Then you can just use a manually position the baked object to the center that you want, and then uh, use it here. Okay, so if I select all this, you see that I can no longer select the baked object from this object right here. So make sure that the baked object you're planning to use for this is unselected. So for this objects here, I'm going to use the plane from the selection as my bake origin and set the depth location to the lowest geometry. Normal AO displacement, and we're just going to bake this tree here, or probably we're also going to bake the diffuse. But first, I'm going to assign a vertex color to this. set it to island. There we go. And in the shader, just attach the vertex color to the base color. Okay. And okay, let's VC matte, select all the meshes, and then assign the meshes to all these objects. There we go. So just some subtle shading on the different islands. Okay, let's go to images and bake normal AO and diffuse and displacement. If the diffuse is rendering black or baking black, then just reduce the metallic to 0. I think that's the one's causing the problem. Select all this and then select the 048 for the bake map size. And for the AO, let's use 128 samples. Others is 2. And let's bake. So the speed of the baking is dependent on the complexity of the models and also how many meshes you have selected for the baking process. So we just have to wait for a bit. And also, the map size is also going to affect the speed of the baking process. It'll take a while. The AO is probably the longest because of the samples. If you use 2 samples, it's going to be really noisy. So something like, if you have the time, 512 or 256, or in this case 128, is kind of 128 is sufficient for speed modeling. And if you're trying to save this, and when I try to save this externally, and when you use, if the color space is non-color, the saved file in Windows will look very dark from this. So when you save this, change the color space to RGB to make it look like this, and also the normal map to make it look like this. If it's set to non-color, it's going to be really look like very saturated green, and it looks like an object map and not a normal map. So change the color space to sRGB when you're trying to save it as a ping file, and then when you use this inside Blender, then you can use the non-color for the color space, not RGB. Okay. Let's create a box that will house these textures, and then create a shader, and then just connect the corresponding maps using the UV. So this is bake normal. So it's already set to non-color. But if you're using an external texture, you have opened this map externally, it will be, by default, it will be set to sRGB. So for the normal map and displacement, the color space should be non-color. So remember that. And color, mix color, and we have the bake diffuse right here. Set it here and multiply the AO to that. For the bake normal to show correctly, you will also use the normal map vector node, and we have the displacement here. So non-color for color space, and set this here. So right now it's going to be rendered as a bump texture, bump detail, not a full displacement. So displacement, set this to height and set this to points 25. Okay, let's view the map. And the AO, that's the AO is the dark part. Okay. Then we can control the the scale using just this mapping node. So all of their scale is being controlled by this universal control. Okay, and for the diffuse, of course, you can use your own stuff. This is just an example. And we're going to use it for, let's see, change the HDRI. I think the is it the displacement? No. Oh, the fuse is not. There we go. That the diffuse is not plugged to the right node. So from here, we're going to test it with another random geometry. So random textures assigned to random geometry. Cube. We're going to use random loop extrude to generate the random axis extrude to generate the branching geometry, and then use displacement to create the details. For displacement, you need optimally you need faces that are evenly sized and mostly squarish. Okay, but don't use too much geometry, of course. Random axis extrude, 10 iter high depth, not 10 iterations, high depth. The base cuts here. Okay, we can try and disable the Z axis. So it Z XY Z. Yeah. And then we're going to go to the depth. Let's manipulate these values. And probably use the full axis. Okay. And layering another one on top of this. Just play around with this. Ooh, that's not the seed value, that's the iteration. Okay. Now I need to actually make sure that these are evenly sized square, which this is not. So this part here is going to pose a problem. So let's try remeshing to create those evenly sized faces. Generate remesh. Let's go to wireframe to view the resolution. Smooth shading, sharp, and increase the octave depth. So we can actually just use the remesh, not the subdivision for the. So instead of using subdivision for this displacement, we can just use the remesh and assign it here as well. I think we can assign it using Control L and copy modifiers. No, copy modifiers. Okay, remesh. This should be the active button with the modifiers. Copy. There we go. Okay. And then in this one here, let's also use the remesh. Let's look at the resolution. Okay. The only problem we have is the UV matte. If this doesn't work, we'll just use the object mapping. Okay, and grab this material icon here and set it. Actually, let's just select everything and use creative flow. Hide everything else. And then it show up. Not the VC. I think it's not the VC. So the material. Oh, what? Sign material. Material. So it's not assigning. For some reason. VC matte. There we go. Sign material. Material. Okay. Something's going on. So I'll just do it manually. Okay. Hide everything else. And here, since the remesh geometry doesn't have UV map, let's use object mapping and just, oh, the doesn't work on the generated. It doesn't work on this part here. It's kind of odd. And I think that's because of this one. Change it to box when you're using object mapping. So for UVs, you have to use the flat. This is projection. And when we, okay. So it works now. I've kind of forgot. Kind of forgot earlier. So to make the displacement, just go to settings of the material and set this to either displacement only or displacement and bump. And you see here the effect. We're going to go to the displacement node and kind of work out the mid-level. And this is acting this way because it needs, because the way the amount of detail, the texture detail is too fine for the faces that we have here. So we need to increase the resolution of the remesh modifier uh, to actually generate those detail with some fidelity. Let's change the mid-level to 0. There we go. And also, let's adjust it a bit. Come on, baby. Oh, let's just enter the value manually. 0.005. Okay, 0.01. 0.02. 0.025. Okay. And then we go to 12 octadepth. I think the limit is 12, but you can see here, this is gonna be real heavy, but at least you have the displacement. Let's try 9 octadepth, and scale is maxed out. Actually, let's try something else. Let's try this, the lowest octadepth that you can find, and then I think this is gonna work. Let's try voxel. Let's go to sharp. Remove face disconnected. What is that? Okay, let's try octadepth 8 and scale of 0.99 and apply. And then put a subdivision modifier, control 1. Set the subdivision type to simple and toggle off optimal display so we can see the resolution change in frame mode. Okay, and now let's see the displacement. Now let's just increase the viewport here. So this is with this way this is less dangerous than the remesh. And let's try and change the scale, make it bigger so we don't. Okay, let's try 0.8. So we have those spiking. What is that? It's probably, let's try and set it to displacement only, just to make it brighter. The introduction of the bump kind of makes the texture be darker. Okay, let's try viewport. There we go. 3, and then I think it's the mid level, 0.03, 0.04, 0.05, 0.08. 0.1. Okay, sure. Probably the smooth by angle. Let's move it. There we go. This is 0.00. I'm not so certain where this is coming from. So because of the object mapping. So let's just cube project and use UV mapping. Set the projection back to flat. There we go. And adjust the scale. Okay, the spiking is gone. Something like 5 or 7. There we go. So the spike is gone. So we just use the UV mapping and it looks much better now. Okay, let's replicate the process on this other geometry. Set it to 8. Scale is, actually it's just use, since everything is, we can actually reduce the, keep the form, but actually reduce the amount of, oh, okay, 0.9, it's good. And Control A to apply. Actually, do we need to? Yeah, we need to apply. Apply and add subdivision. Use simple subdivision type. And then view projection, because this is just mostly uh, angular in a way. And then we have this thing right here, view projection, and apply, add subdivision, use cut mount, use simple subdivision type, and then view project. And for this one, instead of ruining the scale for the rest of the model or the other models, I'm just going to uh, scale the UV map instead. Okay. Now all we need is some lighting for this. Let's go to film and set turn off transparent so we can see the sky using the HDRI, and actually use a different HDRI for this. Okay, we can introduce chaos to this by using too much displacement. Something like 0.4. Okay, and can also adjust the big diffuse should be on top. AO is in the bottom. Control the diffuse using color ramp. Okay, now we can introduce some lighting to this using shaders. Okay, I'm going to use the emission shader group from random flow. Okay, somewhere around here. Shift Q shading and append materials. But I'm not going to use the materials. I'm going to use the group nodes, and specifically the lights UV. Plug it to the emission lights UV because we're using the UV mapping. Plug it to the emission and okay. Offset factor is 0.05. Random factor 0.5. There we go. Random factor 1. and size is 600, offset, and probably use a less saturated color, and increase the strength to 20. So let's try seeing the material again, or all of the shaders in action. There we go. So you have the lights and all our displacement. So this is just an example. You can of course just use the displacement on a lighter object like um, uh, paneling details. So in this case, we just used it for creating a kind of like a station. There we go, and probably set the metallic to something like 0.5 to lessen the amount of reflections. Okay, so now it looks better. And yeah, let's try and render this. Go to compositing and render. So this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to delete this. Set the to max 2.8. Reset this. And rework it. Okay. And we're going to add a lighting node for the dark areas, just to give it some sort of haze color. You can see the it will try and colorize the dark areas, and you can increase its effect. So probably difference. No, just lighten and set it to just 0.01. Okay. And next up, the color of the highlight. So the map range, you can use it to actually generate a highlight from the render picture. Then you can use the color mix factor in the color mix node, or the color factor in the color mix node to change the color of the highlights. So it's sort of like that. And also other effects like uh, if you use filter, I mean blur and fast blur, fast Gaussian. Something like that. And then we're going to use another add node here. We can use it to add this kind of halo. Oh, okay, not this. There we go. And just reduce its influence using the add node here, 0.1. And you can increase the size of the blur by just blurring more, like that. Okay, so let's turn this off and turn it on. So just a subtle haze effect on the highlights. And then I can re-render this where I'm going to use the emission, and yeah, so set the emission here, and we're going to use the glare node and use the glare output. And then we're going to re-render this because the emit factor or layer is not in that render image yet. So let's change the streaks to blue. So it generates the same like glowy dreamy effect on the lights as well. And you can add in clouds and what's that fog volumetrics to this to add more realism. So this is a good starting point for you, especially if you're just starting out with Blender and trying out some render, uh, trying out your compositing techniques. You can composite in Blender or save all your render layers and just composite in GIMP or Photoshop. Okay, let's try it this way and see what it. Okay, so the greenish in the shadow, the greenish part of the shadow, you can change that something really blue. Okay, and also let's try and you can also use something like from an earlier video where I showed you to make the render sketchy, not sketchy, like it's been drawn or like it's been sketched. So we can use dilate road, and there we go. And since this ruins the color, we can then introduce the color back from the original image using the color mix node color. Oh, it should be on top. This should be on the bottom. Nope. Oh, we need to. There we go. So you can make it like this to make it like a sketch, or turn it off just using 0 steps. Okay, so yeah, this is it for this video, and it's just a small exercise on baking the random details and creating some random details from that. Actually, let's render it this way. I'm going to introduce the field, which is not ideal for very large objects, but let's just try it too in order to blur the background. Make the empty here. Okay. So let's just pretend this is from Ant-Man's world. Was the building is really small. Okay. Let's render this. And this way it looks like. Uh it looks like a miniature, like it's been shot with a tilt lens. Probably because I'm using 100 millimeters for the focal length. And also the blur is what's giving this effect. So if you're rendering like very large objects like spaceships, motherships, buildings, it's advised not to use the blurry what's that called? Depth of field, because it will make your models like a miniature like this one. So it's good for some effects like this to generate this kind of miniatures world. If you want this kind of look, you can certainly achieve it using DOF and a really high aperture or focal length. Okay, so yeah, that is it for this video again. And if you have any questions, use the comments or the links in the description. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.